I'm going to go presentation mode. So hey, everybody. Welcome to our preseason bocce webinar. Thanks so much for joining us. We do have a pretty full agenda here today because we want to make sure that we kind of get through the normal preseason stuff, but also talk a little bit about return to activities and, you know, what that looks like, just a super high level, and then really dive into what is bocce going to look like this season, because it will look pretty different than it has looked in the past. So Jen, you want to go to the next slide? Jen, can you just hit present there?
I can't find it.
It's at the top next to the yellow button on the top right. The one that says share, presents right next to it.
I don't have that on my screen. Do you have it on your, are you sure you don't have it on yours?
Do you want me to just share my screen, Jen?
Yes.
There you go.
Oh, I have it when I'm.
Okay, why don't you just hit present then and then share your screen. Sorry, y'all. So just to go through the agenda. Myself and Jen are here with you tonight, as well as Deb Andrews, who's our bocce sport director. We'll be the three really presenting the information today. If you have any questions as we go through the presentation, we would prefer everyone to stay on mute just so there's not a whole lot of background noise. You can please just drop them in the chat bar. We'll try to get to some of those towards the end of this call. We're also going to pop up a few polls throughout. So you should see it pop up on your screen. You just need to quickly select one of the answers. We'll give you 20 seconds. And then we can just kind of share out what those results are as well. So I'm going to run through a bunch of housekeeping. I'm going to go through it very quickly. Again, just so we've got enough time to actually focus on the bocce specific stuff. If you have any questions about any of those things, please feel free to reach out to myself or Jen at any time. We'll do some bocce rules and updates reminders, both SOI's rule updates. It's a new rule season, as well as SOPA's kind of updates. We'll do a very high level return to activities overview. We'll talk a little bit about what virtual competitions will look like, so focusing on the sectionals and the Fall Fest competition for this year. And then we will dive into bocce. So you want to go to the next slide? Again, and like I said, really just some reminders here. Just important that as you are if you are getting back to in-person competition, really important to remember we've still got to be in that 4-to-1 ratio. All coaches within that ratio must be Class A volunteers. Important too that if you are deciding to do virtual training instead of just in-person training, also required for those coaches to be Class A volunteers and to have all of those appropriate certifications. So definitely something you can start working on now. Again, whether you're planning to go back in person, if you're still debating, but just making sure that all of your coaches still have that Class A approved status. And if they don't, just getting them updated with protective behaviors or a new background check, whatever it is that they need to have that. As far as certified coaches go, we will be flexible this season, so we will not require certified coaches. Again, always preferred, but again, we will not be requiring it. We'll be a little more lenient, just knowing that some of our typical coaches may not be able to coach or may not feel comfortable coaching this season. We are running, though, a virtual training school, which will result in a coach certification. That'll be held on Saturday, August 15th at noon. And if you're interested in doing that, you can register via the Visas portal, which we'll talk about in a minute here. And just a reminder, this was part of our strategic plan, which ends the end of this year, so in just a few months. But as we move forward, it is required that you must have at least one certified coach per 25 athletes. So again, this season we will be flexible with those things, but hopefully as we move into whatever normalcy looks like after this, that will remain a requirement moving forward. Athlete medicals, again, something else important to just touch on here. We recognize that COVID-19 has created an issue with athletes receiving updated medicals. So in response to this, we're offering a 6-month extension. So for all medicals that expired from March through July, so through July 31st, those athletes are eligible for a 6-month extension from the date of that medical. So just important to note that any of your athletes, so the allowable start date is now August 1st for fall training. Any athletes that have medicals expiring August 1st or forward need to have an updated medical in order to participate. And for those medical extensions, again, just important to note that if there's been any major changes in an athlete's health status, if they have been infected with COVID-19, or if they have had any significant symptoms, difficulty breathing, chest pain, shortness of breath, things like that, they should see the doctor and they must get an updated medical prior to returning to play. Go to the next one, Jen. Just something we always kind of like to remind everyone of, just responsibilities of head and assistant coaches. And again, this continues to apply, I think, in the current world that we live in right now. We have updated the position description, so you can utilize that link to see pretty in-depth position descriptions that we've put together for head and assistant coaches, which hopefully just help some of those head coaches kind of delegate responsibilities and everyone just to have a better understanding of what your role is. It's really important for there to be clearly defined roles. You know, it's the head coach's responsibility to manage a lot of the administrative things, develop the plans, and really delegate, right? Delegate to the other assistant coaches or, you know, chaperones that may be available at your sites. And just like your team is going to be more successful if they're working better together, the same applies for the coaching team. You know, you can run practices more smoothly and things like that if everybody's on the same page and kind of knows what's coming up next. So the next one. All right, so just talk a little bit about our Visas portal. Hopefully, you're all pretty familiar with this at this point in time. It's kind of your one-stop shopping for paperwork and like things like that that you need to turn in, right? So this is where you'll do all of your Class A certifications. Anyone who applies as a new volunteer, this is where you'll be directed. This is how you'll get your Class A clearances. Whenever you're looking to sign up for training schools, this is where you have to go to be able to do that. And again, just a reminder, it is a requirement that you're registering for training schools, whether it's the online ones that we're doing or if we get back to in-person, those in-person training schools. Pretty easy to walk through, and we do have some additional resources if needed. But again, you know, if you've got questions about anything, you can feel free to reach out to myself or Jen. So some of the things that are available there, you can see those bullets is signing up for training skills schools, doing your STA form. So this is new. We'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. Giving interest on having a training school in your area. That's the level 1 interest form. And then there's an application in there for the track 2, the experienced coach, which if you have experience in that sport, just need to fill out that application and it'll be reviewed. So talking a little bit about the STA form. So again, this is brand new, hot off the press. This will be the new format for submitting your sports training hours. Once you take a skills training school to be a certified coach, this option will then pop up when you click on the sports training application, and you'll just search the sport. It'll come up with that, and right there you have the ability to submit your hours. You can go in and submit them as they're happening. So you can, you know, on a weekly basis, I'm going to go in and just track them so I don't forget. Or you can submit them once you finish all 10 of your hours and you've kind of completed it. Once you do get to that 10-hour mark, our staff will kind of get a notification. We'll go in and just review those hours. If we have any questions or anything looks funky, you know, we'll reach out to you or your program manager. But those things will be approved, and then that'll go directly into your Visas record as a then certified coach. So again, just trying to streamline processes, make things a little bit easier. Just another effort to help us do that. And again, that just kind of talks through, again, we'll send out these slides. You can see in a little bit more detail what some of these things look like. You can go ahead, Jen. We'll talk too about Class A requirements. So again, general orientation, protective behaviors, concussion training. If you're interested in doing Fit 5, you can also find the Fit 5 video and quiz here to take to complete that. So again, just kind of one-stop shopping. And if you're not familiar, we ask that you just get in there and familiarize yourself with it. In order to log in, it's just your email and then a password. If you forgot your password, you can feel free to hit that like little forgot password button and it'll email you a new one. If you're having major issues logging in, again, you can just reach out to one of us and let us know. Coaching education. So this is still something that's required. I think, you know, when's a better time than now to kind of check where you stand on this and maybe get online and start looking for some continuing education just to re-up your current certifications. We've got a ton of online courses for this listed on our website. A lot of them are free. Some of them have a small charge associated with them. Jen is actually working over the next few days on updating that continuing education list. So we're constantly kind of making updates. So get in there and just check out what's available. There really are a lot of different types of opportunities. If you have a question about an allowable continuing education course, you can reach out to Jen and she'll kind of review it with you and either accept or deny that course for continuing ed. And as a reminder, that's required every 3 years to keep your certification. Again, just kind of another shout out. We have the SOPA Coaches Facebook page. It's been a really successful group. We post a lot of information there just about things that are happening on our end, reminders for webinars and deadlines and things like that. But there's also a pretty good dialogue and just conversation if coaches have questions about things, and we highly encourage that. So if you're not already a part of this page and you utilize Facebook, we would just recommend you just have to search SOPA Coaches in the search bar. It'll come up. We just ask you to answer 2 questions. You have to say what program do you coach for, and then what sports do you coach, and then we'll go ahead and accept you as a part of that group. We have continued with our Lunch and Learns. For those who may be on this call who typically attend, it's been a little dicey this year. We're trying to kind of focus on it and get back to it and, you know, do some topics that hopefully are beneficial to you all. We typically do these the second Wednesday of every month at noon. They're all recorded and posted to the website, so you can access those at any time. They live under the Volunteer Center and then trainings, and then there's a little button that says Lunch and Learn. Some of these are eligible for continuing education. The ones that are have a little asterisk next to them. There's a quiz that's also associated with that you need to take just to be able to use that for your continuing education credits. As mentioned, we're always looking for topics too. So if you've got an idea, you can send that over to Jen. So just some of our upcoming ones, we had to push the August one back. So we're ready to kind of do that rollout. But it'll be focused on the virtual fitness program that's coming out. There's a national committee that's working on putting this together. So we hope to have that information coming to you guys initially like mid-August, but we'll take the August Lunch and Learn to do another training on that specifically. And then just uniform logo requirements, always a hot topic. It'll be a good one to have on there for future reference. And then something that we call Unified Fitness, which is a program that we've really rolled out with our Unified Champion schools, but it's very easily done virtually. So I think now too is a good time just to push that out more broadly to individuals. Coaches training and progression plan. Hopefully you're all pretty familiar with this. Again, I think a great time if you haven't started to kind of work through this progression to jump on board and do so. Fit 5, which we'll talk about on the next slide too, is really a great thing that you can be doing virtually with your team or in person. It's something that just you activate during practice. You can do kind of at the beginning or the end of practice. Part of that as well is the Coaching Special Olympics Athletes course, which we are holding virtually. Jen had done 2 of them in the spring, 1 in May, 1 in June. We're looking to do some additional virtual trainings of that this fall. So again, just keep your eyes out. But if you're interested in kind of looking to get started in this, again, I think now's a really great time to do that. We will also start offering, if we go to the silver, we're going to be offering Principles of Coaching in a virtual format as well as Coaching Unified Sports. Coaching Unified Sports is already available. You can pay to take that course online, but we will be offering some through SOFA staff and some volunteers that will be free for you to attend virtually. Next is Fit 5. So again, if you haven't kind of got started with this, we would really highly encourage you to do that. It's super easy. You can just go to our website. You click on this Fit 5 sign-up form. Once you do that, you'll get contacted by one of our staff members to provide more information. There's a quick training video. I think it's like 10 minutes long that you take. You do a little quiz to go along with that. And then once you've completed those things, we send out, it's a very turnkey program. So we'll give you all the resources that you need to be able to execute that with your athletes during a practice. And again, like I said, it really can be done successfully either virtually or in person. Just an update on USA and World Games. So what was the 2021 World Games in Sweden has had a location change. So it is now going to be in Russia. And that was just due to like the Swedish government ended up pulling out pretty close to last minute. But it was great. Some of the SOI team was able to kind of regroup and get that event scheduled for Russia. So it's actually going to be in 2022 now, in January of 2022. And we do have 8 athletes attending that game. The more important thing is 2022 USA Games, which I know a lot of people have been kind of asking and wondering about. So at this point in time, they are still scheduled to take place as planned. That's what we're hearing from SOI and the local organizing committee down there. So they are set to be in June 2022. We have just received our allocation. So probably September, we'll be sharing that with you guys. Just want to kind of get all of the return to activities off the ground at this point. But we'll be sharing that out more broadly. There will be coach applications for sports like bocce for all of the individual sports that we'll push out as well. We will manage this a little bit differently than we've done in past games. So we did this for the 2021 Winter Games. But there'll be a pre-selection questionnaire that some of you might have remembered getting pushed out for that event that'll be distributed. And it's going to be really important that you all just help us get this in the hands of all the athletes who you would deem as eligible and are interested in attending this event. It'll almost be like a registration form. So if athletes don't fill out that questionnaire, they won't be considered for games. So in the past, like you've had to kind of check those boxes on entry forms. That won't be the process anymore. Those individuals will have to fill out this pre-selection questionnaire in order to be considered for selection. And again, more info on that to come, probably late September, October. Fall Fest this year was supposed to be the qualifier for that game. We have pushed that back. That's as far as we can really push things back is till November of next year. We will make decisions if we continue to kind of be living in a virtual world as to how we'll make selections for that event, but we will need to start to do so throughout 2021. So we'll keep you all informed on that. And then the 2023 World Summer Games will be in Berlin, Germany. That announcement had come out a few months ago, so just some more information to come on that. All right, and I will pass it over to Deb to give some rule updates.
Jen, we can go to slide 18, I guess.
Okay.
Slide 17 is just the email address, and slide 18 is just we're going to replace roll toss with roll, and we usually use the word roll anyway, so we're just used to using that anyway, so that's easy to replace. And then slide 19, if the bocce hits the polina and lands on the tape, when we're doing individual skills, we replace the polina on the X, and if the bocce hits the polina, and you'll put the polina back on the X and put the bocce right next to it, and the remaining balls then will be thrown, and if it's still behind the polina, the measurement will be 0. Some people didn't understand that in the past, and they put, 1, 2, but it will be 0 if it hits the bocce. If the bocce hits the polina, I'm sorry. And during competition, the competition manager will allow the coach to speak to the player during the official coach's timeout. So we're going to have a timeout, the duration and the process and protocols of which will be advised to the coaches prior to the start of all competitions. And we'll tell you about that a little more in the next slide, I think. We'll be putting together, when I missed the slide, we're on slide
21.
21. Okay. We had a bocce survey, and the outcomes from the survey, we'll be putting together a new officials training to certify anyone who wants to be an official. So we have more officials across the state for ourselves. And the coach's chair will continue to be used because we did get a lot of people saying they really like the coach's chair. It'll be at the 30-foot line or the rear of the court, depending on the facility. I know the 30-foot line is the best because you can see better. You can see all the balls better from there. But here's something we have also added. We are going to have timeout. Each coach will have a 60-second timeout in each game. The coach will ask the official for the timeout. The coach then walks to the athletes. The coach who calls the timeout, their team must be in possession of the bocce when they call the timeout. But I think this will help a lot with a lot of people that have had a lot of problems with the changing of all the information. And I really believe that's it for me. So I will return this to Jen and Michelle.
Okay. Oops, got to slide back there. I think it's time for a poll. So a question. Michelle, do you have the polls?
Nope, you have to share them.
Says you're logged in from another device. Your polling session.
Oh, I do have them. But you can't see my screen.
I can't see them. This is Deb. I can't see them.
Yep. Michelle, we'll bring it up in just a second.
I won't be able to see them because I'm not on the Zoom.
All right, hold on. We're a mess right now. Sorry, I wasn't ready to share my screen. Got a lot going on here.
Okay.
Let me pull up the budget webinar. All right, can you guys see the poll? Oh, hold on, launch poll. There you go. Can you see the poll now?
I can't.
Nope.
Jen, I don't think you'll be able to see it. Can someone else let me know if you can see the poll that's up? Yes, okay, perfect. Perfect. So just the question there is, are you planning on returning to in-person activities this fall? And just give us a yes or no. Give you about 5 more seconds to answer. All right. Perfect. Looks like we've slowed down, so we'll end there. So just to share with everybody, so we've got 23% that said yes, planning on coming back, 7 people, a majority saying no, and another handful undecided. So that's great. Say thanks for kind of providing that input and feedback. The plan really within this is to provide information for both. And we will definitely we'll talk about it at the end here, but we'll be providing you all with more information on what those virtual options look like. We're just finalizing some of that stuff, but it'll look pretty similar to what you'll hear talked about tonight as well. So just a heads up for you there. All right, I can click through this, Jen.
Okay.
So just our return to activities plan. So we did a bunch of trainings last week. If you were not on those, there's a ton of information available on our website. But this is kind of what the phases of that plan look like. The first is what we're calling phase A, that kind of aligns with SOI phase 0, and that's the stay-at-home phase. So that's where those individuals will participate in virtual trainings and competitions. Phases B and C, which aligned with SOI Phase 1 and kind of half of SOI Phase 2, but this is where we will live this fall. So Phase B, you have to do first, so you do have to start and work through the progression, is allowable up to 10 people per training site. You need to work in Phase B for a 3-week period, and then your COVID-19 coordinator will just apply to move into Phase C after that, as long as everything has gone okay at that site. Phase C is up to 25 people. That is as high as we will get this season. So if you typically have a training site with more than 25 people, you may have to consider splitting into 2. On the next slide, we'll just talk a little bit about high-risk individuals. So throughout all of these phases, anyone who falls into the high-risk category is not allowed to participate in person. So those people just need to kind of participate within Phase A. The other 2 phases are D and E. So D is up to 50 people. E is up to 150 people. And we, as you can see, we will not enter either of those phases this fall. So we'll continue to kind of reevaluate on a season-by-season basis, just what's happening with the virus, kind of where we feel comfortable going. But that's where we are right now. So if you haven't seen that, there's just kind of a high-level overview. As I mentioned, so we've got a lot of links to resources here. There is a ton of stuff up on our website. So I do just, if I can, sorry for all of my crazy tabs across the top there, but I want to go to our homepage quick just so you can see how to get here. So this is our homepage. If you just scroll down a little bit, you click on this banner here, it's going to take you to this Return to Activities page. So this includes, I mean, really everything that you need to know about returning to activity. And if you go here, this is probably the best one. If you go to this resources for coaches, we tried to kind of divide it up so it makes sense and you can go and see, okay, this is the stuff that I really need to know. There's some video resources. So these are some just short clips that focus on each of those specific things. This is a recording, the Coach Return to Activities webinar, recording of the webinar that we had done last week. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours long. All these videos are a part of that webinar. So if you'd like to sit down and get kind of a real in-depth understanding and training of what's happening, would encourage you to do that. But utilizing those video resources will help you have a pretty good understanding of what you need to do if you're going back to in-person training. And then just a bunch of documents here. So we've done the actual Return to Activities guide itself is some like 40 pages long. So we've done kind of a condensed version for the coaches, something that would be good for you to print out just to have at practice or kind of on hand. It just goes over, you know, the major requirements of anyone at a training site, and then it kind of outlines in a nice little chart, you know, what is allowable in some of those different phases. So again, I think just a good resource that's not 30 pages long as a quick reference. All of the individual skill guides are here for each of the sports. So you can see bocce there. We'll refer to that in a few minutes. And then again, just a lot of other good resources. The information on high-risk participants, a BMI calculator, which is part of the high-risk, code of conduct form. So everyone participating in person, coaches, volunteers, anyone who's in person at a training site will need to complete this code of conduct and risk assessment form. We encourage you to send that electronically to everyone prior to. If you know that some athletes might not have access to electronic copies, if you could try to get them a hard copy so they can be completing that document prior to arriving at the training site, and they'll just hand it to the individual that's been identified as that COVID-19 coordinator when they arrive at the training site. So again, just lots of good resources there. As far as SOPA's end, Chelsea Hamill is our identified COVID-19 coordinator. So if you have any questions about kind of these specific things that aren't sport specific, so any questions about high risk, any questions about those forms, any questions about a COVID-19 coordinator, you can reach out to Chelsea and she can help you with those things. If you've got sports specific questions, again, just please feel free to reach out to myself, Jen, or anyone on the sports team. We can help answer those questions for you. All right. So just some important highlights to touch on quick. So we just want to make it really clear that participation is 100% optional. We don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable or that they've been forced to, you know, to go back and return to play. Some counties as well. So it's really important as you're trying to decide what to do that you touch base with the leadership in your county. Some counties are making decisions not to go back, which we've given them kind of the authority to do that. So again, just really important that you're touching base and kind of seeing what's happening within your county before making plans to move forward. The attendance limits include anyone at practice. So athletes, unified partners, coaches, any one-on-one requirements, spectators. So again, I mean, especially in that 10 phase, you really need to tell mom and dad or whoever's kind of bringing the athletes to practice that they need to either stay in the car or they can just drop off, you know, make sure everything's okay, and then leave and kind of come back and pick up. So important things to communicate with your families and parents prior to the first practice. At-home virtual training competition will be available. So we'll have a few different options, again, which we'll kind of talk about. But we feel that it's really important, and we really want to try to keep people engaged, both coaches and athletes alike, throughout this whole process. So we're trying to make as many things available as possible. If you've got ideas, thoughts, you are always happy to hear them. We've done a lot of brainstorming on our end, but I'm sure there's a lot of good ideas out there as well. And as we talked about, those risk assessment forms must be completed by everyone. So just a few kind of to highlight some of the coach responsibilities for return to play. So as we talked about, just really educating everyone. And it's important to educate everyone prior to coming to practice. So if you're holding maybe a conference call or a webinar, just reaching out to people individually, kind of whatever works best. You know how to communicate with your athletes and family best. But talking about the signs and symptoms of COVID, just making sure that everyone has a pretty good understanding of what it's going to look like when you get to practice. You know, no high-fiving, fist bumps, hugs. We need to keep our distance. We need to keep that 6 feet apart. The fact that, you know, bocce is going to look a little bit different. Here's what that's going to look like. I just think the more information you can give to prepare people ahead of time, the more successful you'll be once you get there. Also important too, so people need to kind of self-identify as high-risk individuals, but important to just remind those people, and it's for their own safety, right, that we want them to remain home and continue training at home. And as a coach, you're more than able to kind of run an in-person training as well as a virtual training. So if you've got, you know, some athletes that aren't able to train in person, but you're still going to be doing that, you know, and you want to take another, you know, half hour a week to work with some of those virtual participants as well, that is 100% acceptable from our end. Everyone must wear PPE. So we're asking that everyone bring their own face masks. There will be some provided. So SOPA is providing PPE to all of the local programs. That will then be distributed per training site based on the number of people that will be there, but we'll be providing hand sanitizer, disinfectant, gloves, some additional face masks. So those things will be provided, but again, we want everyone kind of bringing their own as well, as we don't have enough to give everyone for every practice. Important that you're telling them to bring their own drinks. So we are not allowed to kind of to have coolers or jugs of water, which, you know, you may have typically done in the past. Everyone must be responsible for bringing their own drinks, as much of their own equipment as possible, to each of their practices. And the big thing is, you know, equipment can't be shared. So there can be really no cross-contamination. We'll talk about kind of how we're going to manage that for bocce here. Bocce is a tough one to kind of allow that to happen. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Just a quick checklist for the athletes. I'm not going to harp on these things, kind of just talked about it, but good information for you to be sharing with them, you know, prior to practice to make sure they have a good understanding. All right, dive into just kind of what virtual competitions will look like. So we will plan on doing virtual sectionals as well as a virtual fall fest. We've been working with those committees, lots of brainstorming going on. These will look different than summer games, look and feel different than summer games. We really want there to be a competitive atmosphere to these things. Summer games was much more, you know, we put these challenges out there per sport. We didn't give awards. So we're approaching these events much differently, that we really want them to look and feel like a normal competition as much as possible. So the dates for these, so we're doing them all together on the same day, all three sectionals. Saturday, October 3rd will be the main day. As we continue to talk about what this might look like, it might run over 2 days. So just kind of a heads up that kind of that weekend will be fall sectionals. just dates there for entry information. I know these are pretty tight turnarounds, but again, in order for us to kind of stick to and be able to division and then award, we felt it was necessary to kind of stick to some of these kind of normal entry dates. Fall Fest will be the entire weekend, kind of similar to Virtual Summer Games was. It'll run over 3 days. And again, just the dates there for that. So just a few more things on competition. So everything different than Summer Games will need to be coach-led. So even if athletes are doing virtual training, they'll need to be training under a coach. You'll have kind of that roster of participants. You'll submit visa rosters. So again, very similar to any other training season. So we'll ask that you're submitting preliminary scores 3 weeks prior to. They'll be utilized for divisioning. We'll division just like we always do based on ability, age, gender. We'll talk about the honor code in just a second, but just asking, living in this virtual world that, we felt like it was necessary just to put some statements in place, for what that honor code, for what that would look like. Then Monday prior to the competition, you need to submit your final scores. We'll then take those and come up with the final results. We will be giving awards for these events. So mailing awards probably either to the coach or a local program manager who will then be dispersing them. We definitely don't have the capacity, and really it's more of a financial thing than anything, to be mailing an award to every single individual. But again, they'll get to you somehow, and then we'll just ask that you do some drop-offs or, disperse them to the individuals. So just talk a little bit about the honor code, and I'll run through this quick. We have actually we thought it was pretty important for the virtual trainings to develop an athlete honor code as well. If you are in person, the coach really has control over, making sure that things are being managed consistently from, one training to the next, and that measuring is being done properly. But in the at-home setting, the athletes are really going to be the ones doing those, with their caregivers or families or things like that. So we have created an athlete honor code as well. That'll be pushed out with kind of the Phase A virtual trainings. But it's just, again, it's managing this like a competition, right? So the athletes get one attempt to do this. I mean, you'll have practices and you'll announce, okay, we're going to start competition now. Like, this is competition. They'll get one chance to kind of do their roles, and that'll be the entry score that you will submit. Just important that, like, if an athlete would step over the line, that's a foul, that's a dead ball. That ball's not going to count. They'll get a foul, I guess, for that ball. So it's just important to treat it just like we would any other competition. Making sure that you're using the same surface as you would have used when you're submitting divisioning scores and when you're submitting your final scores. So if you did your divisioning on a grass surface, just making sure that you're continuing to do your final scores on a grass surface, just so that it's that kind of consistent surface that you're utilizing. Meeting deadlines, again, I mean, nothing new there, and just making sure that you've got the proper equipment to be conducting competition with. So that's a summary of it. That is also listed on the website for you to see the whole version of that if you were interested. As we talked about, we will be giving actual awards. We'll be doing place of finishes. We're working on so each skill has its own division, isn't really appropriate for bocce, but some of the other team sports that we're doing, which is why that's on the slide here. But we're working with our DOCs right now to kind of figure out what will a virtual award ceremonies look like. I think this is one of the more challenging things that we will have to tackle, but I have confidence that some of these college students can come up with some pretty good ideas. So it'll be fun. And all right, I will pass it over to Jen to dive into bocce here.
Okay, so Michelle, I don't think I have any rights here, so if you want to go to the next slide. All right, and so we're looking at the bocce return to activities guidance. Michelle had showed you the book a little earlier, but Michelle, can you go back and give a quick little look through the book here? All right, so you want to scroll down. So the book has as it goes through, it's going to talk about the coach's responsibilities, requirements, and the phases, training and competition, and all of the resources that are available. Again, this information is the same throughout every book to make sure that we are all following the same requirements. When we get down here a little farther, we'll start talking about training and competition. It continues on with recommendations for trainings, equipment that you will need, virtual competition entry information, what will take place during phase B and C, the format of the competition, what is available, how to measure, how to score. All of that information is written out for you. And then it talks about scrimmages. And then finally, we have created virtual competition sheets that you can use to fill in the information while you are at your practice or your training. So those are all the resources available for you. So we'll hit the next slide, which is about your practice plans. So we feel it's very important to create those plans. People often forget about creating those plans. The great thing about having a practice plan is you can share it with your assistants. Everybody is on the same page. You can set specific times and stick to them. It allows you to be prepared for every drill and what is coming up next. And it makes your practice consistent. It structures them, has a nice flow, and the athletes can get into the rhythm of a practice and be used to it week after week. Next slide. So for phase B and C, we created a practice plan, and this is an example for you. As you see, it starts with your COVID-19 coordinator arriving and setting up and sanitizing. Coaches arriving, we'll be having a warm-up, and then you'll see we're splitting everybody into group 1 and group 2. So there'll be 2 coaches, 2 groups of athletes. They'll spend 10 minutes working in different stations. So if they're with group 1, they're going to work on some stations for bocce, and there's some examples for you. The group 2 will be working with another coach, and they'll be working on flexibility, core strength, cardio conditioning, all the things that a good athlete needs. We'll have a 5-minute break during that time. Equipment will be sanitized, we'll get some water, and then we will switch groups. So then the coaches will run through everything a second time, now with their new group. We'll have cool down, and then we'll follow up with sanitizing the equipment and wrapping up again before everybody heads out. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that we're going to talk a little bit about training recommendations. So space and equipment, you are going to be limited. You may have to stagger your practices. So if you have a 2-hour practice, you might have one group, half of your group coming at the first hour and half of the group coming at the second hour. For drills and scrimmages, only 1 or 2 athletes can be on the court. So this will take a little bit of time. So again, you're going to need to stagger through there. If there is not enough equipment available, you're going to need to set up fitness stations. Okay, so you just saw we had 3 stations set up in that practice plan. And remember that you're going to always need that 5 minutes to disinfect between it. And you might have to come up with some alternative items to train. So if you don't have enough bocce balls, you might want to use backyard bocce sets or types of similar balls. So you might have to get creative with the type of the balls you're using, the surface you're using, and what your athletes are doing at practice. Moving on to the next slide. The bocce competition format. So for in B as well as C, in those 2 phases, this is the competition we'll be using. And just as in traditional bocce, we will be playing from one end, and the athlete will be delivering their bocce balls from the service area. But this time, the coach is going to place the initial pallina on the 40-foot line. Okay, so again, just like when you're doing skills, we do the 30-foot, the 40-foot, and the 50-foot. The coach is placing the pallina on the 40-foot. Then the player will roll all 4 balls to try to get them as close as possible to the Polina. Next slide, please. So the coach will measure the distance of those 4 balls. They will record them in centimeters. Remember, as in skills, if the Polina is knocked from its spot, then the Polina will be replaced back to that 40-foot spot. So again, you might want to have some painter's tape to mark the 40-foot spot so you know where to place the ball. And again, we want to be consistent in competition so the ball gets placed back. The athlete should compete measurements for 4 frames, okay? 4 frames, 4 balls each, all aiming at the 40-foot line. Next slide. We'll be offering this competition in 3 different areas. The athlete can participate in singles, so they would be required to play 4 frames. The doubles, so the athletes will play 2 consecutive frames, and that will add up to the 4 frames for the match. And if it's unified double, the athlete plays 2 frames, the partner plays 2 frames, and that will each equal their 4 frames. So you can register for competition for singles, doubles, or unified doubles. Next. Remember, when you're measuring, we want to be consistent. So you're going to take the 0 end of the tape measure and you're going to put it in the side center of the bocce ball, and you will measure from the Polina to the bocce ball. Okay. If the bocce ball and the Polina are touching, if they're nice and close, they are going to be 0 points. And again, record all your scores in centimeters. Next. So for scoring, each player plays their 4 frames. 4 scores are recorded for each frame, and this is 16 scores. And then your scores will be submitted for the results. This is a copy of what you will see in your guidebook of what a score sheet would look like. So this is the information you will be entering for their competition. Next slide. Okay, so you just saw a little bit of how we're planning on working phase B and C. Now phase A, and also during B and C, if the athletes aren't able to come to competition because they're high risk or they're not comfortable, and coaches, if you're high risk or you're not comfortable coming back to practice, we have something available for you also. So for at-home virtual bocce training and competition, this will be led by a coach in weekly video or conference calls. The coach will help provide necessary equipment. They'll adapt the gameplay using household items, specific competition divisions for at-home training. So everything that we just talked about, we're working on a way to make it also virtual, that you can do it from home as well as you can do it in person. Another item we're working on is a virtual fitness offering. It'll be a fitness challenge, a virtual fitness challenge. And yes, we will need coaches for that virtual fitness challenge. And we will also be having a national distance challenge. Excuse me. The distance challenge will be, as it says, national, and will be offered through our international office. And what's kind of fun about it is a step challenge, but instead of measuring steps, you're measuring the distance. And we'll be able to compete against other states as well as one county competing against another. So this information will be available in mid-August. We will get it all ready for you and give you some virtual opportunities instead of coming to practice. Okay, so Michelle, I think we have one more slide. Or not? So it's time.
Yep, I think it's just that.
Okay.
But I'm gonna pop up the polls, Jen.
Yep. Bring up the poll.
So let's see.
I believe there's 2 more questions in our polls. So take a couple seconds, read the question, and please give us your feedback.
Oh, hold on. Here we go. Got it.
These polls are trickier than we thought.
I know. We're new at this poll thing. So the first question we have there is, would you be interested in leading at-home virtual training and competition with your team? So yes, no, or you would prefer to be in person. And then the second one is just, would you prefer the virtual at-home, for the virtual at-home training option, would you prefer something to be sport specific or the fitness option? So your options there are sport specific, fitness focused, I would do both, or I'm not interested in training virtually. So we'll keep that open for a little bit longer. All right, I'm going to go 2 more seconds. We'll go ahead and end it. Awesome. We'll share the results here. So about half of the people on the call would be interested in leading some at-home virtual training competitions. So again, that's great. Definitely still some people who want to be going back in person, again, which is fabulous as well. And then it looks like we get for the virtual options, definitely prefer maybe, well, 3 to 2, so not significant, but some sport specific. A lot of people saying they would do both, which is great. And there will be the opportunity for everyone to do both. So whether an individual is training in person or virtually sport specific, all of those individuals will also be able to do the virtual fitness or virtual distance challenge challenges as well. So great to hear. I'm gonna X that out. So yeah, now we will just go ahead and open it for questions. Jen, I see you replied to some of them in the chat. So do you want to just kind of go over what they are? And then as we do that, if you have any additional questions, if you just want to pop them into the chat box, that'll be the easiest way for us to manage this.
Okay.
Michelle, this is Deb. I have a question, but I don't have the chat box because I had an error and I couldn't get on.
Yeah, no worries, Deb. What do you got?
Well, I'm just wondering, since we're offering singles, would it be okay for a high-risk athlete if her parent, say, is a certified coach, takes them and does this in person and sends it in instead of doing virtual with them? You know what I mean? Like, let me give you an example. Like Ashley Bresler is overweight and has a heart condition, so she is an at-risk athlete. But her dad is a certified coach. If he takes her and plays singles with her at the bocce courts, can she still be an athlete?
So, so yes, because the people who are training virtually are still kind of considered athletes, right? And they'll still be entered into training and competition, just like the ones that are participating in person.
But she won't be doing it virtually. She'll go to the courts and do it physically, in person with her dad, say.
And which is fine, but she would still be considered a virtual athlete because high-risk participants are not allowed to participate in person. So again, kind of regardless of the opportunity that she might have, high-risk individuals are not allowed to participate in person. So it's fine. I mean, they can still make a decision to go down to the court and actually participate in that fashion, but she would be entered as a virtual participant for sake of for competition.
Okay, I have another question. Now, athletes are going to have to handle their own equipment. They have to go pick up their own balls. What if you have an athlete that cannot go down, pick up their balls, and carry them back? Would they be considered a high-risk athlete and have to do virtual because they can't carry their own balls? Because the coach would have to get them.
Yeah, that's a good question. And as I said, there will be gloves provided as far in the PPE kit that we're giving to each training site. So in a situation like that, maybe a coach just puts a glove on to be able to roll those balls back down to that athlete and then takes that glove off and disposes it. And if they need to do it again, they just put a new fresh glove on. So I think that would be one way to manage. I would not say that that would qualify someone as a high-risk individual if they weren't able to kind of retrieve their balls on their own.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, no problem.
Okay. Then let's head to the questions. There was a question about the sports training application. The question was basically, at one time, the coach had to have someone sign off on their volunteer hours to get certified. The answer to that is that will be in the past. The new way, the volunteer will insert those hours, and then the manager will be notified that the STA hours were submitted. So if they will be asked to share that with their training coordinator or competition coordinator, whoever is watching. And what will happen is they will have the opportunity to let me know if there is a reason that that person should not be getting those hours. And one thing I want to clarify is when you do go into the STA form and you put your hours in, when you go to click on the sport, the only sport that's going to show up is ones you have attended the training schools in. So you will not be able to enter something in an alpine skiing for hours if you did not attend an alpine skiing certification. That is why it's so important to register for a training school, because when you register and attend, it will show up in your record, in your VSIS record, so that you can input your hours. Okay. The next question was when the bocce, if the bocce hits the Polina and the Polina rolls away and the bocce rolls away, does the bocce just roll and wherever it stops, it stays, or does it go behind the Polina? And the answer is that if you hit the Polina with your bocce ball and the Polina continues to, or the bocce continues to roll, wherever the bocce stops is where it stays, and the Polina is removed and replaced back where it was. Okay, so the only time you move it is if the bocce lands directly on the spot where the Polina was. All right. Then there's a question about the Polina, if it is knocked from the 40-foot spot, at any time, is it returned back to the 40-foot? And the answer is yes. Anytime the Polina is, whether it is during any frame at any time, once it is removed from that 40-foot spot, you would return it immediately before the next roll. Okay. Then this answer, here's a question, or it's just actually someone's asking for a clarification, and the clarification is, why can coaches not coach in bocce? Why are they not allowed to talk to their athletes? And all the other sports coaches are constantly directing, refocusing athletes. Just wondering what our rationale behind this decision is. And I'll answer. Michelle, chime in afterwards if you have something else. Deb, same thing. But basically, what we are actually following the guidance and the rules from the rule book. In the rule book, you will see that it also tells you that a coach is not to be directing the athletes during play, that the athletes in the doubles teams are to be working together to play the game. You've done a great job coaching them, and now we'd like to see what they can do. So the athletes are to work together to play, and that's why we're adding the timeout. So in every game, you will now have officially 2 timeouts, one for each coach can call it, in which you can talk to the athletes to refocus them and give them that support that they need. Michelle, anything you want to add? Deb, anything you want to add to that?
I would add that because bocce is a timed game, if you do get to talk to your athletes in between, we have found that it holds up the game much too much, and then they don't get to play as much as they really should be playing.
one of the other things we had talked about is as you advance, so you go to national games or world games, this is very strongly enforced. So in most of those situations, the coaches aren't allowed to even be on the courts with the athletes. They're told to sit in the stands. So again, as Jen said, it really is part of the rules. It's not something that we've strongly enforced in the past. And I know there's been different opinions on it for sure, but I think we've heard some pretty cool things as well. You know, that like it was amazing to see how much my athletes started to work together when I wasn't there to tell them what to do, and started to kind of rely and lean on each other a little bit more. Again, you know, as a coach, it's your job to prepare them for competition as best as you can, right? Work on some of those things that they really need help on during the training sessions. And again, I mean, we'll continue to kind of evaluate this, but I think we've seen it be pretty successful so far. So as we said, we'll continue to do that moving forward.
All right.
Well, it doesn't look like there's any other questions that have come in. Again, I think if you do have some questions, feel free to pop them in. Jen and myself and Deb will hang on for a little bit. As you start to kind of get more into that bocce guide, if you're going back in person or if you're planning on doing things virtually, again, if you have any questions, just please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to help. We want this to be successful for everybody. And, you know, we thank you for kind of bearing with us, and we really hope that you'll stay engaged and you'll help your athletes stay engaged during this time. I think it does provide, even if you're doing something in a virtual setting, the ability for those individuals to at least maybe see each other, you know, like we're able to see each other on a screen here, or talk to each other. If they don't have that capability, they can call in on a conference call, but still to get some of that socialization and engagement with one another, even during these times. So I know a lot of you have been doing that even throughout, and we thank you for that. Again, if you've got some good ideas, some games that you're going to play with your athletes, whether at practice or virtually, we would love to just hear that stuff. We can even start kind of a resource page on our website for some of those cool things that you guys are doing. So thank you for everything. And again, we'll hang on for a few minutes in case anybody's got anything that they would like to add.
Okay, we do
So
have
thanks so much for
question.
participating.
We do have another question, and the question is, will athletes be able to play in singles as well as doubles? And the answer to that, Michelle?
Is no. So just like at any event that we would do, they must choose kind of one of those options. It would be okay if they decided to switch from sectionals to state games. Again, there won't be advancement. We won't really monitor those things. So if they were a singles person for sectionals, but they want to do doubles now for Fall Fest, that would be allowable. But they can only enter in one of those categories. And again, as a reminder, they can also do virtual fitness or distance step challenge if they're interested in doing one of those.
Okay.
Hey, Jen, this is Lester.
Yeah.
Question, if you become a COVID coordinator, is that something that would count towards continuing ed?
No, it will not.
Okay.
No.
I have a question about a COVID coordinator. If you have two athletes at in-person practice, you have to have a coach and a COVID coordinator, or can the coach be the COVID coordinator?
The coach can be the COVID coordinator. And just important again, and I hope if you're planning on being that individual that you either participate in some of those trainings next week, or it'll be important for you to go and look at some of those recordings that we had put on there. You know, there is definitely training and information that's necessary for anyone that's serving in that COVID-19 coordinator role. In order to be allowable to operate as a training site, you need to submit what's called the site registration and advancement form, I think is what it is. So that'll need to be submitted prior to starting practice, and we will be answering all of those requests within a 48-hour timeline. So again, all of that stuff can be found up on our website. Pull it back up real quick. So again, if you're acting in that COVID coordinator role, it's just important that you're familiar with all of those those things. Let's see if I can find the link to this form real quick. There it is. So like that would be the link to this form here. So that is under the COVID managers kind of, leadership, and then the COVID-19 coordinator resources. You would need to fill that out in order to be activated as a training site. There's COVID-19 coordinator checklist, so responsibilities. So again, if you're fulfilling one of those roles, it's just important that you check these things out. There's something else that came in, Jen?
We have a couple items coming in. Just a reminder that when you are in phase B, it is 10 athletes. So it's when we say 10 people,
No.
we're referring to the 10. There has to be, the 10 has to be all of the people who are on that venue. So it would be the coaches, the athletes, and the site coordinators. So if you have 2 coaches or 3 coaches, then you can only have 7 athletes there. So the 10 equals everybody combined, okay? Athletes.
And again, you need to be in that phase B with 10 for 3 weeks. And then as long as everything's gone well, you will go back to that site registration and advancement form and say, we would like to move up to phase C, which will allow you to have up to 25 participants.
Right. And remember, participants are athletes, coaches, and the COVID site coordinator. And there's a question about what's being done for athletes that do not have internet access. So one of the items that will be able, if an athlete does not have internet access, the one item that I know they can definitely participate in will be the National Distance Challenge. So we will have information for you on how to do that without internet.
And again, I think hopefully they have phones. So, even if you're on a virtual Zoom call like this, there's always a phone number associated with it that you could give to those individuals, and they could call in to participate and still be a part of that. For some of them, you may need to provide some additional written materials. And again, we will try to cover that stuff in depth in the virtual training guide that we'll be putting out. We want that to be a resource that you could pass along to an athlete and they could look at. We'll have a bunch of diagrams, and they could kind of understand what they need to be doing as well, even if they can't physically see you showing them what that looks like. So we'll try to do our part there. But again, I think your athletes the best. So maybe it's even a one-on-one call with some of those individuals just to make sure that they have a pretty good understanding of what is supposed to be happening with that competition.
Okay. And Jane, I hope that answered your question. Jane was asking about resources for training virtually.
Yeah, so our target date right now is mid-August. We're hoping to have some final drafts put together by next week to just kind of run by our senior leadership team, and a mid-August rollout for that. We'll really bunch everything together. It'll kind of be a phase A rollout, which will include the virtual fitness training, the distance challenge, as well as the sport-specific activities. We will run another webinar specifically for virtual training. It'll just be across all the sports, but just trying to give some tips and pointers on, how to kind of successfully conduct some of those things.
Okay. Jane, when the virtual resources are ready, you will receive an email announcing it, as well as it will be on the SOPA website. So please keep your eye on the SOPA website under the COVID-19 information, and we will make sure emails are going out to everyone.
And our goal is that week of, I think, August 17th is what it is, right? That kind of.
Yeah, Michelle is trying to kill
the middle
me.
of August.
All right, looks like the questions have slowed down.
All right, great. Again, we're here as a resource. If you've got additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're all trying to work through this together, so we want to be here to help as much as possible. So thanks so much for everyone for participating this evening. Hope that we've shed some light on what this will look like this season, and you know, go out, start to talk to your athletes and families, see what people are interested in doing. I think the more of that you can start to do now, so you've got just an idea of what's going to work best, you know, for you and for your team. Make sure people have medicals, make sure coaches have Class A's, and then we'll be ready to get up and start training again. The official start date, I mean, it's 2 days, but the official start date for the fall season is August 1st. So, but you would have had to submit your site registration form and things like that to be able to start. So, great. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for jumping on this evening. We really appreciate it.
Have a good night.